virtue of the authority conferred on me as Vice-Chancellor, I constitute this Assembly a congregation of the University of Cape Town.
We will now sing the national anthem. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to invite Stephen Stewart-Steer, the Vice President External of the Law Students' Council, to read the university dedication.
Good morning. At this time of celebration, we, the members of the University of Cape Town, reaffirm our mission to nurture rational and creative thought and free inquiry, to strive for excellence in teaching and research, to educate for life, and to address the challenges of our society. We undertake to advance these ideals in a spirit of freedom and responsibility and through consultation and debate. We celebrate our founders, benefactors, and predecessors, those who have built the fabric and nourished the values of UCT. To those of you who will graduate today, we wish courage, wisdom, and purpose. To those who will leave the university to learn and work elsewhere, may you be sustained by those values which unite us here today and advance them in the world beyond. A love of truth and of learning, and of this, our university.
Please be seated. One knows that the world is really changing when people read their sheet music off iPads and Kindles. A very big thank you to the Afro Jazz medley performed by Mornay Katz, Andrew Hull, and Graham Strickland. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the students of the UCT Opera School for leading us in the singing of Gaudiamus and the National Anthem, and to Eben Wagenstrom for playing the organ. I'm here now officially to welcome everybody on this occasion. I've done so informally already before the proceedings started. A very special welcome goes to the parents and friends of the graduates who are here today, and of course to the graduates themselves. I'd like just to say a few words to the graduates, particularly in relation to the challenges that they will face as they go out into the world. Today we have here people who will graduate as lawyers, doctors, and in various financial fields. The challenges you will face will in some cases, of course, be personal, but in many, they will also be ethical. So whatever you do, make sure that you can always live with the moral consequences of the actions and the decisions you take in your future lives. I'd like now to invite the Dean of Health Sciences to lead the Faculty of Health Sciences declaration.
Vice-Chancellor, I invite all the graduates of the Faculty of Health Sciences, as well as those who care for patients on the platform, and also those who care for people and patients in the congregation, to join me in the reading of the declaration. The declaration is on page 6 of your blue book, which is on your seat. And I invite you now to stand and join me in the reading of that declaration. This is all health sciences graduates. And those health professionals who care for patients, including at the time of being admitted, read with me, at the time of being admitted as a member of the health profession, I solemnly pledge to serve humanity. My most important considerations will be the health of patients and the health of their communities. I will not permit considerations of age, gender, race, religion, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, disease, disability, or any other factor to adversely affect the care I give to patients. I will uphold human rights and civil liberties to advance health, even under threat. I will engage patients and colleagues as partners in healthcare. I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity. I will respect the confidentiality of patients, present or past, living or deceased. I will value research and will be guided in its conduct by the highest ethical standards. I commit myself to lifelong learning. I make these promises solemnly, freely, and upon my honor.
Vice-Chancellor, the President of Convocation Medal honors a past student who has made a distinguished community contribution. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present for the award of the President of Convocation Medal for 2012, Kate Phillip. This medal is awarded annually to an alumnus or alumna who has made a contribution to the common good. Kate Phillip is one such person. In 2001, she was the recipient of the Gauteng Premier's Unsung Heroine Award. She is quite clearly a heroine, and she has remained largely unsung. She is an alumna of the class of 1982. Is it still echoing? Okay. Okay. Dr. Phillip is a development strategist. In 2007, she led a strategy process on inequality and economic marginalization for the South African presidency. The South African cabinet approved the overarching framework for this strategy in January 2009. As part of this strategy process, she initiated and managed the pilot phase of the Community Work Program to demonstrate how the concept of a minimum employment guarantee could be adapted and applied in the South African context. By the end of the pilot phase, the Community Work Program had over 50,000 participants. Since the 1st of April 2010, it has been institutionalized in the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and had grown to 99,000 participants. Phillip continues to provide technical support to that program. In the course of her professional career, she has worked for South Africa's largest trade union, the National Union of Mine Workers. She has established and run an employment creation NGO, the Mine Workers Development Agency, worked as a social development advisor and private sector advisor for a major international donor agency, and has been part of the design team for the development of a course on innovations in public employment programs for the International Labour Organization, which now runs annually at the ILO's training center in Turin, Italy. Her policy and strategy work is rooted in extensive implementation experience. She was CEO of the National Union of Mine Workers Development Wing, the Mine Workers Development Agency, until 2002. This agency established a network of development centers offering training and business development services to micro-enterprises in mining towns and rural labor sending areas. It was also involved in market facilitation to bridge the gap between rural enterprises and wider markets and value chains. Her doctoral thesis was entitled Enterprise on the Margins, Making Markets Work for the Poor, and explores the limits and potential of market development approaches. It explores the notion that markets are social constructs and asks how they might be constructed differently to achieve different social and economic outcomes. Kate Phillip was president of NUSAS, the National Union of South African Students, in 1983-84. She has carried the values and principles of her student activism into her life as a professional and as a citizen. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to invite you to award the President of Convocation's Medal for 2012 to Kate Phillip.
By virtue of the authority conferred upon me, I admit to the degrees specified and grant the diplomas specified to the candidates recorded in the program as being in absentia. I shall now grant the diplomas and admit to the degrees specified the candidates to be presented to me.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present for the award of the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, Nicholas Roland Leybourne Haysom. On the 21st of April, 1952, a certain Mrs. Finkelstein gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. However, when the baby was brought to her room, he was not the baby that she was expecting at all. He had blue eyes and blonde hair and was most definitely not her baby. She protested. The mistake was discovered. Her own baby was found. The imposter baby was returned to his own mother, Mrs. Haysom. Mrs. Haysom took her baby home, still wearing his Finkelstein label, and thus was born the name that has really stuck, Fink Haysom. Despite that accidental imposter beginning, Fink Haysom has carved a career focused on authenticity, starting as a student leader and lawyer in South Africa and becoming a global peacemaker and mediator. As a student leader, he was hardly ever in class, being more concerned with resuscitating the dying National Union of South African Students. Happily, NUSAS survived, at least in his time, and Haysom, despite his scanty lecture attendance, successfully graduated as a lawyer. As a founding partner of Cheadle, Thompson and Haysom, one of the most prominent labor and human rights law firms in South Africa, he continued his quest by challenging apartheid using the courts and the law. In the South African transition, he was a negotiator, legal advisor, and technical expert for CODESA and the ANC's Constitutional Commission. But for him, it was much more than just public service. In his own words, constitution making is rich and cerebral. It was a privilege to take a country that had been so divided and to forge a common destiny based on shared values. As legal advisor to President Mandela, Haysom was one of the most important members of the Office of the President. Mandela was famously hard to advise, but Haysom's astute approach was not to stage manage. He said, "People trust and believe in Mandela because what he says comes from the heart and not from a political advisor. That's what allows him to govern with such authority." Since then, Haysom has stepped very firmly into the global arena. Firstly, as an international advisor in the Burundi and Sudanese peace talks, then as leader of the Constitutional Support Team in Iraq, and now as political director in the Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Constitution making and peacemaking have no blueprints, but Haysom has become adept at these challenging and creative processes. He has made a name for himself as the master of forging consensus between warring parties, breaking impossible deadlocks, and borrowing shamelessly from any constitutions and processes that might assist the cause. According to his old professor, Dennis Davis, Fink was always destined for a bigger stage, with his ability to think things through, his sense of the bigger picture, and his long-standing commitment to legal and social justice. Despite his accidental imposter beginnings, he set about pursuing truth and justice and has done so for over 35 years. He has become internationally recognized for his vision, his masterful skills, and his authenticity. If Mrs. Finkelstein were here today, she'd be very proud. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to invite you to admit to the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, Nicholas Roland Leybourne Haysom.
It is a great honor for me to invite Nicholas Haysom to address this audience today. Thank you.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, members of Senate and Convocation, graduands, ladies and gentlemen. Let me at the outset say what an outstanding honor it is to be recognized by this great university, my own alma mater, but by an African university that continually questions how it can fulfill its responsibility as Africa's foremost university. In acknowledging this great honor, I want to also confess a certain humility which I'd like to share with you, and particularly the graduands, because it speaks to at least one of the challenges you will face upon graduation. And the truth is that it's not just that there are people, even in this hall, colleagues and friends who could be in my place and equally and more deserving. It's because the nature of public interest work and the public service I've been engaged in is essentially collaborative. It requires people to work together. And I'd like to just share with you one war story in this short speech, which in a sense reveals my understanding of public interest work. Shortly after I and a number of academic colleagues had set up a law firm to do privately public interest work, we received a phone call from an intern, a paralegal, actually Clive Plaskett, now acting judge of appeal, complaining that at his clinic he had been receiving a pattern of complaints and asked our assistance in dealing with it. And the pattern of complaints was the routine administration of electric shock torture to suspects that were taken into the station and thereafter their summary release. And it was a problem which had vexed us lawyers for some time, the normal remedy of a prohibitory interdict proving largely ineffective. At that time, there was a doctrinal dispute in the Provincial Division of Transvaal High Court, Supreme Court, because one judge had, in very uncollegial terms, referred to another judge as an Old Testament prophet, speaking of old, in the course of a dispute as to whether an arcane patent remedy called the Anton Piller Order had been transferred to the South African law. At our tea time discussion in my law firm, somebody said, "Why don't you use the Anton Pillar order. The Anton Pillar order is a remedy which allows someone who thinks that their patent has been infringed to conduct a surprise search on their competitor's factory to seize the equipment or the machinery which is offending the patent. From that conversation amongst a number of colleagues, which included Professor Cheadle, amongst others, Azur Kachalia, now Judge of Appeal, there was a chain of events which led us to, first of all, search for an advocate who was prepared to argue the point, and there weren't many, to find a pathologist who could prove that an applicant who claimed to have received electric shock treatment had indeed been tortured, to find a client who was willing to confront his torturer, and to put together a legal team and the necessary research to do it. To cut a long story short, we had a secret hearing of a full bench in the Eastern Cape, and the court decided, yes, the Anton Pillar order was available to South African applicants, and yes, the Anton Pillar order could be used by torture victims to conduct surprise searches on police stations to recover the torture equipment. I should add, in this Solomonic judgment, the court decided not to grant the applicant's case because, as they found, his case was too strong for the use of such a robust remedy, and he could secure his rights without use to it. But the case itself was an extraordinary case, an out-of-the-box thinking, and it would lead to a real reversal in the widespread use of electric shock treatment in South Africa's police stations. For some time I like to claim the credit for this case, but the truth is it wasn't my idea and it wasn't my work, and certainly not mine alone. So to whom do we give the recognition? I and my colleagues who had managed the case, the authoritative Sidney Kentridge who argued it, the judges who ruled on it, the client who bravely agreed to challenge his torturer, putting both himself and his family at risk, the community of lawyers who provided the moral support and the intellectual courage to test the law, the administrative staff who conducted in secret the logistical arrangements, the brave pathologist, Max Gluckman, who would find and be prepared to testify in proving that the biopsy of skin that he had excised was in fact had been subject to electric shocks, or the philanthropists who paid for the litigation. Well, the answer is simple, all of them. They all deserve recognition. And in my view, this is a long way of telling you that in your postgraduate life, graduation life, you will enter a world in which you will be continuously exchanging ideas, drawing creative courage from your peers, and if you're a lawyer, moral courage from your clients. I would be remiss if I weren't in commenting that for many of us who practiced human rights law, and in the work that I do now, I currently live in Kabul, in Afghanistan, that it is families, a special community frequently ignored in the distribution of recognition and affirmation, but which make much of this work possible. And really what I've said about the practice of human rights law applies equally to the field of conflict resolution. The position of a mediator, a conflict resolver, is frequently to enter these high-risk, low-trust environments to provide the ideas the combative parties need to find and manage ways of living together to manage their common destiny. And those ideas largely come from the community of fellow practitioners. I say this all for two reasons. Firstly, because I suspect that what has been so important at university, which is how much you know, is going to be less important than what you do with your knowledge and who you do it with. A second reason I make this point, because it gives me an opportunity to place special credit to some members of that community with which I've been fortunate enough to engage in my work, and who have been mentors for me. And those three include two who passed away only this month, in Professor Jakes Gerwel, the former Chief of Staff of Nelson Mandela's office, a former Vice Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape, and a man who had an ability to draw out the best from the people around him. Arthur Chaskelson, with whom I worked in drafting the very first constitutions that would be submitted to CODESA and then the multi-party framework, was a man to whom I think South Africa entrusted the stewardship of the legal profession and the early application and implementation of our Constitution. A man characterized by an extraordinary humility and a refreshing absence of personal aggrandizement. And both of them exhibited a real zest for public service. The third mentor, who I mention because his own health has been the subject of national concern over the past week, is Madiba. And if I can just share with you briefly one or two observations about this great man. Madiba was first of all characterized by a resolute vision of a new South Africa, of a new non-racial South Africa, and which drove him. And it was a vision to which he gave an iron discipline. He manifested in his fastidious punctuality, his determination not to be hijacked by rancor, but also, because there is a tendency to characterize Madiba as a benign uncle, he was capable also of a steely resolve on issues of principle, a steely resolve which was truly intimidating. For me, though, I would want to share with you that in working with Madiba, I found a person with an extraordinary grace and graciousness, an ability to appreciate those who worked with him, whether they be the cook or the king. And it's that, a combination of all of those, which allowed him to become the person who is bigger than the divisions between us. And I know this so acutely because in Burundi and Iraq and in Afghanistan, where I am now, and in Sudan, people often excuse their inability to find each other for the lack of a Nelson Mandela, a person who was bigger than the divisions between them. And it was that which allowed him to leave us, or he leaves us, a human capital which it is for us to use. There's a second reason that I feel indulged in receiving this great honor. Simply put, it's this, and I want to distinguish myself from many graduation speeches in which the graduates are told, quite rightly, that they've had the enormous privilege of going to a great university, and that privilege should now be atoned by public service. I happen to believe in public service, but I don't believe it's a punishment. And I want to argue that it is its own reward. And thus I feel doubly rewarded being here, both rewarded by this extraordinary life, working with the most marvelous people and the most meaningful issues. Several years ago, when I was at Harvard, I was dragged off by some students to listen to America's version of George Bezos, the sort of legendary human rights lawyer called William Kunstler, who'd just been awarded an honorary doctorate there. And Kunstler, as was his fashion, provocatively told the audience that they were recognizing the wrong person. He said, "I've had a wonderful life, and even if I have lived for years in a trailer doing rural farm work cases, I've had a life which has been both interesting and meaningful." He said, universities like Harvard should not recognize people like me. What they need to recognize is corporate lawyers, because it's the corporate lawyers who work long hours, die young, have, he called them, venal clients, and meaningless work. And he felt it was the public duty of great universities to celebrate people who had exchanged life for a living. I won't go that far, but I would want to emphasize that public service and public interest work is truly rewarding. And I don't want to say it's fun. That would be to do a disrespect to my colleagues working in very dangerous and unhealthy conditions in places like Kabul and Baghdad. But there was none of the lengthy periods I've spent there that I would want to change. And the work itself is just tremendously challenging and rewarding. So as you get ready to make choices about what you do, I would encourage you to make space for an engagement, even partly, with the issues that affect your community, your country, and of course the globe. About 15 years ago, I encountered a young lawyer who was about to leave the law to go into the business world. And he shared somewhat wistfully with me, in fact rather accusingly, the observation that it was my generation of human rights lawyers who had been born at the right place and the right time and had been thus privileged to do all the exciting law cases, the once-in-a-lifetime law cases that his generation would never have the opportunity to undertake. And at the time, I recall, I was persuaded that I was perversely the subject of enormous and fortunate circumstance. But on reflection, when I think of the challenges which face our communities today, which face the country and the globe, and when I think, certainly for lawyers, the vastly improved instruments with which to meet those challenges, my mind has changed. Those challenges are just as big, just as urgent, and whether they relate to equity, the environment, liberty, the management of resources, or global warming, I think those challenges are as daunting as anything that my generation ever faced. And so in concluding, I would want to say, quite honestly, to the new graduands, over to you. Do a better job than my generation has done. Thank you.
All great people are also people of extraordinary humility. I think what we have seen today here is a great person speaking with that kind of humility. The example you have set through your life and in your address this morning is an indication of the importance of humility, I think, but also of the integrity that goes with that humility and of the commitment to social justice. Thank you very much indeed.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the Associate in Management Practice, Percy Muller-Jooster. Lee Ann Lau. Sheena Mangaru Pillay. For the postgraduate diploma in business administration, Insaf Khan. For the postgraduate diploma in management practice, Carol Barnard. Jatin Bana. Vanessa Ann Boyes. Leopold Muganizi Biemelwa. Neil Chetty. With distinction, Shireen Davids. Mark Anthony De Beer. With distinction, Jade John de Hutten. Jeffrey Keelan Govender. Koliswa Letizia Hewu. Amos Mashiku John. Sean Peter Cole Lewis. Dibuzeng Paulina Mamabolo. Brendan Graham Massetti. Melanie Elizabeth McGeggy. Tubatsi Shadrach Molloy. Edgar Eddie Celiso Motloeloa. Lucas Cefate Mpepe. Peter Yeboah Owusu. Wendell Etienne Peters. Angela Roberta Pollock. Peter Carroll Saunderson. Molatlego Rodney Sima. With distinction, Dumal Singh. Arthur Andrew Strauss. Nelisive Elizabeth Tabete. Marius Abraham Williams.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the postgraduate diploma in addictions care, Carmen Mari Andres. With distinction, Duncan Bain Lawrenson. Doreen Georgina Lottering. Siviwe Mdunielwa. Nicolette Metcalf. Elizabeth Antoinette Mayer. Ntatu Mfiki. With distinction, Lee Fiona Reinhout. Miriam Minnie Spielman. Stephen Clive Vieri. Gideon David Williams. For the postgraduate diploma in community eye health, Alice Getatso Lehasa. Ramakone Dora Tugwane. For the postgraduate diploma in health economics, Luvuyo Siabulela Zingwa. Amanda Papama Fononda. Puti Thelma Manyena. Christine Mpundu Mutati. For the postgraduate diploma in healthcare technology management, Michael Mkuseli Godana. For the postgraduate diploma in health management, Rachel Sindiswa Maponya. Obakeng Eden Mongale. For the postgraduate diploma in health professional education, Seyi Ladele Amasen. Dumisani Samuel Gumede. Helena Johanna Higgins. With distinction, Leslie Ann Hodsden. Motlachi Riratilwe Bonnie Maloba. Lucas Kunene. Motlachi Riratilwe Bonnie Maloba. Itumeleng Jacobeth Molefi. Craig Bernard Northmore. Motlatle Pula Grace Palwani. Shadang Josias Tamaha. For the postgraduate diploma in nursing with distinction, Abigail Amwa. Joanne Teresa Applegate. Betty Leni Barnes. Nosipo Boto. For the postgraduate diploma in health professional education, Alina Felicia Marian. For the postgraduate diploma in nursing, Sipesihle Butelezi. With distinction, Beatrix Callard. With distinction, Eta Chimbe. Alima Naomi De Beer. Ronnie Lueto Fanampe. Francina February. Ntombi Zodwa Jacqueline Kairana. Ntombi Futi Charity Gumede. Belinda Hamersa. Kelebonye Johani. Jennifer Juta. Janice Ann Capiera. Samantha Elise Claassen. With distinction, Lydia Mahombo. Nosipo Rosaline Makaleni. Alice Mautswa Mamapolo. Bulelwa Mfaka. Beatrice Masozi Mkandawire. With distinction, Lucy Mkutumula. Mabato Rosemary Mweti. Andrew Gobwamang Motuba. Mary Muzombwe. With distinction, Florence Nampande. Clive Sibusiso Nkandla. Carol Dean Denise Neal. Nkweleleni Victoria Ntai. Mariam Pick. Devindiri Pillai. Cindy Chabane Catherine Setiko. Primrose Magnolia Shabango. Jabulile Gloria Shange. Tariwati Subramani. Johanna Stevens. Jonathan Andre Stierman. Fundiswa Tose. Moloko Irene Chipo. Dorothea Catherine Wales. Suwaiba Whiskery. Nombulelo Elsie Koli. For the postgraduate diploma in occupational health, Ashraf Kasim. With distinction, Brent Lindsay Clutie. Samir Kauchali. Anthony Bassi Esiania. Michael Joseph Pravitz. For the postgraduate diploma in palliative medicine, Ntumba Nzonda Arnold Nzale Nzali. Timbani Caroline Nshangasi Sebitso. Chepfo Moffat Shikwani. For the postgraduate diploma in pesticide risk management, Khalid Kassim. With distinction, Ivy Gertrude Mutsa Swanyama.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the postgraduate diploma in law, in intellectual property law, and Dile Lililo. tax law, Mohammed Miller. Ronelle Annalie Williams. For the degree of Bachelors of Laws, Aninka Abadaya. Cum laude, Douglas Charlton Ainsley. Ryan Stephen Allo. Cum laude, Sosi Priala Henry Amabuku. Kathleen Gwyneth Old. Casey John Austin. Alan Nsubuga Basajasubi. Zach Franz Björkman. Edward Baer. Gerald Clive Bourne. Rachel Bukasa. Kim Eileen Cameron Dow. Jason Clive Campbell. Simone Dominique Carlson. Grant Sinclair Caswell. Rudo Renaka Chitapi. Alexander Thomas Kramer. Richard Henry Kramer. Sophia Anna Zarnacki. Samuel John Davidson. Mayuri Dyer. Sean Robert Dayton. Nikita Dahal. Philippa Dawn Dewey. Muhammad Ibrahim. Nikita Melita Ehrlich. Akawalisa Chigozerum Emma Awua. Mark Allen Eskenazi. Magna cum laude, Megan Rose Finn. Robin Travers Ford Garden. Emily Jane Gauntlet. Paul Andrew Harker. Wendy Jane Hoffman. Michelle Lee Harick. David John Hutchison. Sarah Frances Linton Jackson. Jacobs. Stacey Lee Gennari. Gugu Ngapakazi Jumbaili. Michael Jones. Francois Jurgens. Bridget Lester Kell. Cum laude, Charlotte Paula Coles-Cook. Jade Catherine Kolitakis. Whitney Lee Cora. Michael John Laws. James Lorimer Leach. Magna cum laude, Sean Kurt Clittich-Lavore. Lauren Lynn Lewis. Meng Yu Lu. June Mari Luna. Mandy Helen Malik. Raka Aaron Mandipi. Philippa Sue Marks. Kelly Jo Martin. Vangai Wendy Masocha. Rebatili Masogolo Matsamela. Billy Ilana Maisel. Zibonela Kingdom Mpluli. Zubeida Suleiman Mehta. Rodney Terarai Mahungu. Nabila Mia. Danielle Midgley. Stephen James Peter Miller. Cum laude, Jason Mitchell. Retabile Makuleli Mosese. Uniso Moyo. Sandhya Devi Naidu. Shalom Mudrendra Nduka. Ariana Dimitri Nevin. Wawira Njagi. Mashuma Parker. Rosia Parker. Angelo Pasigo. Catherine Ashley Peter. Annunziata Sapiscelli Pesi. Casey Quinton. Justin Roberts. Magna cum laude, Catherine Jill Rosholt. Matthew McCrae Russell. Ariella Scher. Blessing Shava. Ntokozo Nicole Sibindi. Leila Siet. Victoria Margaret Sinton. Cum laude, Kelsey Tanita Smith. Nancy Tarimo. Lloyd Dutton Thane. Alexia Tomazos. Vincent van Biljoen. Briggs Connor Fenter. Simon Douglas Verge. Patrick Charles Wainwright. Lara Eleanor Christina Wallace. Benjamin George Whitelaw. Mumisa Willie. Richard Charles Wilson. Morgan Wood. Daniel Jonathan Wolfe.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Bachelor of Science in Medicine Honours in Bioinformatics, Rebone Leboreng Meraba. Catherine Elizabeth van Zyl. In Biological Anthropology, in the first class, Devon Alexander Finity. In the first class, Shelley Ma. In the first class, Simone Trudeau. In cell biology, Melissa Corbett. Koliwe Qinisile Dlamini. Fleury Augustin Nsole Biteche. In exercise science, in the first class, Lee Devlin Hill. Keelan Ray Van Breda. In exercise science, biokinetics, Sherry Lee Bernstein. Nicholas De Silva. In the first class, Kesia Juliet Davidovitz. Patrick Owen Kay. Simakale Majahana Lunga. David James Mark McWade. Vainant Tian Wendal. In the first class, Nicola Ann Suri. Raisa Solwa. In human genetics, Stephanie Charmaine Dias. In the first class, Andrea Page Gibbon. Tahira Ghulam Hussain. In the first class, Gavin Andrew Farrow. In the first class, Dineo Gift Pule. Amy Lee Roberts. In the first class, Ansi Vichers. In infectious diseases and immunology, Munadia Ansari. In the first class, Chantal Klassen. Lauren Ashton Kruiwagen. Nazila Godsikharab. In the first class, Erin Leslie Logan. Lerato Majara. Trishana Lundalal. Tembeka Seneke. In medical biochemistry, James Peter Francis. Precious Tandeka Hlongwane. Timothy Matsiko Ninsima Klein. In the first class, Lizelle Laba. Christopher Glenn Murray. Bakolele Mlekude. In the first class, Vinasha Ramasamy. In nutrition and dietetics, Fahima Adam. Justin Blanchard. Gabriela Rebecca Burbitsky. Stuart Douglas Cardis. Tasneem Johnson. Faye Elizabeth Moore. Lindsay Ann Pollard. Carla Poole. Magdalene Teron. Kudzai Marilyn Veer. Simon David Wallace. In the first class, Nicola Faye Walters. In the first class, Helene Cornelia Whitman. In physiology, Natasha Seema Hardcastle. In the first class, Bafokeng Mpeta. Asanda Mtinsilana. In the first class, Sinead Amber Ross. Claire Stephanie Stewart. In the first class, Moritz Matthew van den Berg. For the degree of Master of Family Medicine and Primary Care, Jan Kevin Kuna. For the degree of Master of Medicine in Cardiothoracic Surgery with distinction in the dissertation, Agneta Geldenes. In Emergency Medicine, Adrian Berger. Marsha Kukamur. In Family Medicine, Graham Leslie Dunbar. In Neurosurgery, Ntetelelo Mjoli. In Obstetrics and Gynecology, Catherine Elliott. With distinction in the dissertation, Tracy Ann Horak. Linda Ruth Vollmer. In Occupational Medicine, with distinction in the dissertation, Amy de Havilland Birdzik. For the degree of Master of Philosophy in Biokinetics, Fallon Ricky Hope. Wayne Patrick Lombard. Sita Smith. In Disability Studies, Mpilo Henry Boy. Fatima Aesop. Chioma Ogochukwu Chujunwa. In Maternal and Child Health, David Mabirisi. In Pediatric Infectious Diseases, Rini Naidu. In Palliative Medicine, Cornelius Johannes Loftus. In sports physiotherapy, Nadia Jermira Klenzos. David Milner. For the degree of Master of Public Health, Mediatrice Baringayabo. Natasha Hendricks. In clinical research with distinction, James Clark Rice. With distinction, Charlotte Schutz. In epidemiology with distinction, Anibale Kwa. Sarah Lynn Warren. In health economics, Sumaya Doctorate. In health systems, Oluwatoyin Adiwunmi Adeleke. For the degree of Master of Science in Medicine in Bioinformatics with distinction, Holifidi Arisoa Rapwanel. In Biomedical Engineering, Renee Mari Miller. In Cell Biology with distinction, Victoria Louise van Ketz. In Emergency Medicine, Lizanne Mini. Simpiwe Sobua. In medicine, Zulfa Albertine. Chad Mark Sentner. Tapua Enwell Muchinga. Babu Muhammad. For the degree of Master of Science in Nursing with distinction in the dissertation, Renette Liesel Roziers. For the degree of Master of Science in Occupational Therapy, Helga Berger. Jordan Louise Pearton. For the degree of Master of Science in Physiotherapy with distinction, Megan Charmaine Dutton. Patricia Lang. For the degree of Master of Science in Speech Language Pathology, Nicolene Westhuizen.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Master of Business Administration, Jacobus Rudolf Bosch. Sundu Johannes Matitza. Bedas Siame Salasini.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Masters of Laws, Brian Lau Stutty. In Commercial Law, Robert Hartley Bryson. Pascal Habimana. Dorcas Gracious Motzi. Resin Chiedza Papaya. In constitutional and administrative law, Tyrone Dillon Jacobs. In criminal justice, Angelique Habyarimana. In environmental law, Bernice Erasmus. In international law, Rachel Philip Villero Sabanda. In international trade law, Mbakisu Biono Magwapi. In labor law, Kershwin Cedric Bassade. With distinction, Kaylin Nan Massey. In marine law, David Alexander Germayer. In shipping law, Carl Patrick Lamson. Nicola Ann Nell. Michelle Andelia Nganda. Tristan van Heerwaarden. In tax law, Zalani Prince Buba. Mercy Urjanjura Kaziko. For the degree of the Master of Philosophy in Commercial Law, Olivia Lynn Whale. In Criminal Justice, Mariam Ari. In Shipping Law, Lars Martin Greener. Pierre Willem Schutz. In Tax Law, Mark Ian Wiseman. Induduza Justified Knaba. For the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Commercial Law, for a thesis confronting the tax law challenges of electronic commerce and proposing potential alternatives based on developing the principles underlying value-added tax, Anne Michelle Bardopoulos. In Public Law, for a thesis which focuses on the legal framework relevant to the protection of the rights of migrant workers in Tanzania, Juliana Masabo. For a thesis which examines the independence of military courts in South Africa and proposes changes to improve their compliance with constitutional and international standards, Apella Ines Javasi. In private law, for a thesis which analyzes the human rights dimension of the South African law on 4 topical medical biotechnology subjects, namely human embryo research, the use of human gametes, autologous stem cell therapy, and private stem cell banking, Donrich Willem Jordan. For a thesis which assesses the normative basis for the doctrine of vicarious liability in South African law and the implications of its application, Stephen Wagner.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Business Administration for a thesis that contributes to the understanding of the association between action planning strategies, entrepreneurial orientation, financial management practices, and entrepreneurial success, Fawzi Bazardin. For a thesis which focuses on examining the determinants and macro-volatility impact of international capital flows in selected sub-Saharan African countries, William Gabriel Brafu Izaidu. For a thesis which investigates the extent to which innovative Ugandan fish and flour exporters have been able to increase their profitability and improve their sustainability, Timothy Esemu. For a thesis which investigates the extent to which the divergent impacts of South Africa's post-liberalization capital inflow components have complicated or even rendered impotent the dual policy goals of attracting capital inflows on the one hand and mitigating any significant detrimental impacts on the other. Sean Charles Gossel. For a thesis which focuses on cross-country entrepreneurship from an institutional economics and economic development perspective, and in particular examines variations in entrepreneurial activity due to the interactions between formal and informal institutions and levels of economic development. Colin David Reddy.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Biomedical Engineering for a thesis which focuses on developing a novel technique for prospective motion correction in diffusion tensor imaging using a 3D echoplanar imaging navigator, Al-Qaddafi Ali Al-Hamoud. For a thesis which focuses on prospective respiratory motion correction in cardiac magnetic resonance imaging, Ian Hamilton Berger. For a thesis which focuses on the effects of age and genetic variation on innate immune responses to mycobacteria, Muki Shehu Shea. In exercise science, for a thesis which presents pioneering results on objectively measured physical activity from a rural South African setting, highlighting the importance of incidental activity and irrevocably changing the way we look at physical activity and health in lower and middle income country settings, Ian Cook. For a thesis which examines the tackle in rugby union with outcomes which have the potential to make the game safer and more effective, Muhammad Sharif Hendricks. For a thesis which examines the physiological effects of heart rate variability biofeedback during laboratory-induced cognitive stress, Gabrielle Elizabeth Prinsloo. For a thesis showing that exercise performance is regulated by a complex dynamic centrally mediated control by the brain, Jeroen Swart. In hematology, for a thesis which describes the role of the immune system in the pathogenesis of myelodysplastic syndrome, Glenda Mary Davison. In human genetics, for a thesis which focuses on the development of novel, accessible cell models as a means of understanding disease mechanisms and developing therapies for the neurodegenerative disease spinocerebellar ataxia type 7 in South African patients, Lauren Mary Watson. In medical biochemistry, for a thesis which focuses on characterizing 3 receptors in esophageal cancer cells that are important for cancer cell growth, Luke Emmanuel Eso. In medical biochemistry, for a thesis which focuses on the unique chloride ion dependence of the vasoactive metalloprotease angiotensin converting enzyme, Christopher John Yates. In medical microbiology, for a thesis which assesses the performance of the expanded program on immunization in Africa in order to help in shaping the future of the program on the continent, Shay Umaru Charles Waisonge. In medicine, for a thesis which focuses on characterizing the immune response to extensively drug-resistant tuberculosis, XDR-TB, and understanding the mechanisms of immune regulation for the potential development of an immunotherapeutic intervention for this disease, Malika Davids. For a thesis on the prevalence and risk factors for falls in older people in an urban community in South Africa, Sebastiana Zimba Kalula. For a thesis which focuses on the role of melatonin in the cardioprotective effect of chronic and moderate consumption of red wine, Kim Tracy Lamont. In occupational therapy, for a thesis which explores rural women's beliefs, norms, values, and perceptions regarding alcohol consumption in order to propose appropriate health messages for incorporation into strategies for the prevention of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, Lisanne Gracia Kluter. In pharmacology, for a thesis which focuses on identifying and isolating antimicrobial compounds from South African medicinal plants, Karima Danse. For a thesis which focuses on investigation of antiretroviral concentrations and their variability, as well as drug-drug interactions in adults and children to optimize dose regimens when they are used in patients with tuberculosis, and to provide approaches for evaluation of patient adherence, Zhao Zhang. In psychiatry, for a thesis which identifies barriers to and opportunities for participation of South Africans with psychosocial disability in mental health policy development, and develops a conceptual framework for supporting South Africans with psychosocial disability to participate in mental health policy development, Sharon Rose Kleinkies. In public health, for a thesis examining the impacts of medical specialists holding multiple public and private jobs in South Africa, John David Ashmore. For a thesis which explores the epidemiology of acute pesticide poisoning in Tanzania, including the extent of underreporting of occupational pesticide poisoning, and which proposes a national surveillance system for Tanzania, Elikana Eliona Lekai. For a thesis which focuses on the use of information from post-mortem investigations to drive violence prevention, Richard Gregory Matsopoulos. For a thesis which examines the implementation of healthcare services across Cape Town to prevent the mother-to-child transmission of HIV infection, Catherine Lee Stinson. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, the degree of Doctor of Science in Medicine is rarely awarded. It is one of the highest degrees in the university, which is awarded for sustained original contributions to scientific knowledge. Robin Wood's contribution, evidenced in over 100 scientific papers, has been in the important fields of HIV and tuberculosis. His achievements in these areas have gone far beyond the scientific. He was the first head of a dedicated HIV clinic in the Western Cape, and his teams and antiretroviral regimens ultimately became one of the National Department of Health. With UCT engineers, he developed the widely implemented ART dispensing monitoring system. His strategy of influencing public policy through scientific publications based on clinical observations and scientific analysis. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to invite you to confer the degree of Doctor of Science in Medicine on Robin Wood.
Graduates, new doctors, families and friends and members of the faculty, it's been a long ceremony, one of the longer ones we've had, but one of the best, and I'm sure you'll agree it's worth every minute to see these wonderful graduates after years of work. In many cases, some of you won't know that the M.Med degrees that we awarded tonight, this morning, came after some 12 or more years of study, and this is a huge achievement. I want you to give the graduates one more round of applause. Certainly also been a special occasion in terms of our Convocation, President of Convocation Medal and Honorary Doctorate of Law. It may be of interest to you to know that both of them were presidents of the National Union of South African Students. Both were involved in the UCT SRCs, and in fact I see in the audience another UCT SRC president, Steve Converts, with us. And I think what it represents is the main message that our honorary graduate wanted to convey to our students and graduates today, which is that you'll go into the world and you'll have world-recognized degrees, you'll have lots of skills and competencies and perform well, but you'll be judged more than anything else by the values that you live out, by the integrity that you demonstrate. And each of you will have opportunities and in fact a duty, a burden to demonstrate, to provide leadership for a more moral world, a world that is more concerned about social justice, about reducing inequities, about making a difference for the lives of people who are not as privileged as us in being able to have a tertiary education at a fine quality university. It's a message that's been repeated several times today. It's demonstrated through the role models we've seen before us, and I urge you to take that message to heart. And I'm sure graduates, in wrapping up the celebrations, you'll want to share with me your appreciation to the people who have supported you through all these years of study, supported you financially, emotionally, psychologically, have been there for you in tough times and in good times. I invite you to stand up and make eye contact with your loved ones in the audience, hold your scroll up and shout your appreciation to them. And I know you'll also agree with me that you would not have got to the places you are today without the support of the faculty members of the university, the supervisors of your theses, the teachers, and so I invite you to show your appreciation to the people on the stage as well. And I do that too on behalf of the university, express my appreciation to the members of the faculties and to the support staff of the university who have made this the best university in the continent of Africa, a world-class university, and have achieved the excellence that we have. It's been a very good year, and I want to thank you all for that. Congratulations, and go and celebrate.